All right, this is the Coast to Coast Combat Hour. Ed Carbajal here. As always, this week, Matthew Hawkins is off fighting crime in the streets of Southern California. So, filling in for him is Sherdog's Ben Duffy. Ben, thanks for taking time to do this with me, man.
It's my pleasure. I needed to return the favor since you guessed it on my show a few weeks back.
Yeah, off the chains. That was fun. So, just for folks that aren't familiar, can you just say your position over at Sherdog and what you do there?
Yeah, absolutely. I am a senior editor at Sherdog.com, which in my case at least means I do a little bit of everything. I write features, I write opinion pieces, I interviews, I do a lot of actual editing. You know, if you catch any typos or other blunders on the front page in an article, there's about a 1 in 4 chance that I'm the guy that let it slip by. Hopefully not too many of those. And then I am our primary graphic designer as well. So any franchise logos you see, infographics, things like that, I probably made them.
Oh, that's cool, man. I didn't know that. That's dope. I actually like those a lot.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that.
So actually, when I was on Off the Chain, that's when you told me that you actually listen to the podcast sometimes, which is one of the reasons I invited you on to fill in for Matt. As soon as he told me last week he couldn't make it, so you were the first name I thought of. So anyway, let's get right into it. I figured we talk about Matt and I usually kind of recap what we saw over the weekend, and Saturday the Bellator 225 card was a rarity, something that even though the main event was a little weird, but it was all finishes. So I mean, I just wanted to get your take on how you felt about the card. If there's any fights you were interested in, did you catch the whole thing?
Well, I'll break it down for you, and it's actually more than a rarity. Something I learned just yesterday in recording Off the Chain, and I will give full credit for this. This is Jay Petrie, our contributing editor and our in-house stats guy, pointed out that the 14 finishes in 14 fights is the record for modern era Major League MMA. So talking about UFC, Pride, Strikeforce, World Series of Fighting, PFL, Invicta, just, rattle them off. Say modern era as in, like, say, the post-tough era, it is a record.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. I mean, I couldn't think of anything because I feel like the only people recently in the era that tracked it was last season's PFL, because I remember Ray Seffel had somebody tracking the finish rate. So that's interesting. I mean, as soon as you said Jay Petrie, I was like, yeah, of course it'd be him, because he's always coming out with stats and numbers. It's one of the reasons I like talking to Matt too, because Matt's encyclopedia about the history, but I noticed that when we did Off the Chains with Jay, that he's very he's like that with stats.
Yes, yes, and I mean, he knows those things for a fact because he has these giant spreadsheets that track everything from actual weights to finish methods to walkout music. It's insane, the stuff he knows.
That's cool, though. I mean, it's good to know somebody like that. So, I mean, what do you think about as far as like, and I think I brought it up when I did Off the Chains with you guys, but like, so there's cards that can be riddled with decisions and suck, like UFC 208, and then there's things like this past weekend with Bellator. As a fight fan yourself, what do you prefer? Because one of the fights, like, I don't mind if a fight goes to a decision if it's good. Like, I liked Adesanya versus Anderson Silva. I thought that was a good fight that went to a decision. And then most recently, the Yoel Romero versus Paulo Costa. That's one it went to decision and it was fight of the night. So what's your take on like fights as a fan? What do you like to watch?
I like finishes. I mean, obviously, I got into this sport way back when I did because I saw, some highlight reel. I mean, there weren't even GIFs at the time, but, I saw some like scraped like MPEG 1-layer video of some dude knocking another dude out. I mean, that's what I got into it for. As I learned more about the sport and learned more about the arts that make it up, I can appreciate all different kinds of fights. So as far as I'm concerned, if it is a high-level fight with high-level fighters and high stakes, as long as they're showing out what they can do, I'm fine with it either way. In fact, I'd say my 3 favorite fights of the year so far would be Adesanya versus Gastelum, which went to a decision, and then Vicente Luque versus Brian Barberena, which it ended 6 seconds before the end of the fight. But I mean, it was 6 seconds from being a full 3-round fight, and then maybe Ferguson versus Cerrone. So I mean, you got all 3 different kinds of fights there. You've got a decision that was a complete war, and there were swings of momentum, and there were moments where either guy could have finished the other guy maybe, and then it went to a decision, and the judges didn't ruin it for us because it was a righteous decision. And then you had a couple finishes. I'll take all different kinds. If I'm watching low level stuff, where maybe the skill level on display isn't quite as high, I just want to see someone get knocked out or choked out. I want to see something spectacular.
Yeah. No, I hear you. Like, you want it to end if it's not that entertaining, I guess. But usually, like, when you see 2 high-level guys go at it, and it does go to a decision because they're so tough, it's just great to watch. I mean, I always respect the time that these guys put into refining their craft as martial artists, whether they be jiu-jitsu guys or strikers, and mixing it all together. I forget the event, but like Matt Serra versus Karo Parisian, that was actually the fight that got me into jiu-jitsu because of the reversals and stuff like that. So that's actually one I should know the number of the event, but it's a long time ago. But the beginning of the fight, Matt Serra almost got the KO finish, and Parisian came around and was able to get in the clinch, and then it was just like, back and forth, ground and pound, submission attempt after submission attempt, and reversals and stuff like that. So a fight like that, it's like, it goes the distance, but I love watching it. So I mean, it depends on who's fighting and how they're doing, I guess. It's not like no one's gonna. People were dying for a knockout with when Derek Lewis and was it Derek Lewis and Francis Ngannou? Yeah.
And, okay, you bring up a good point. I mean, that is one of the most dreadful fights of all time. Like that seriously, it was just absolutely awful. But at the same time, I don't know if you remember when Crow Cop and Frank Mir fought back in the day.
I should remember that.
Okay. If you don't remember it, it's because your brain has like flushed it out, because it was basically the same fight as Lewis versus Ngannou, just a clinch fest, stagger around fest. Nobody did anything, and then Mir knocked him out with a knee with like a minute left to go or something.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah.
A finish does not redeem a terrible fight, I guess is where I'm going with that. I mean, if Mir had knocked out Crow Cop or vice versa in the first minute of the fight, whoa, that would have been spectacular. But after 13 minutes of just nothing, a great finish doesn't redeem a terrible fight.
Yeah. No, you're right about that. I mean, that's a really good point. Yeah. So, I mean, I was just after the I didn't realize that after Bellator 225 that everything went to a complete finish, until I looked back at the results and, people were talking about it on Twitter the next day. So, but again, the main event of that one is kind of like, even though it was a finish, it wasn't a great finish because of, the thing that was happening with the mouth. It was weird. It was a weird finish, you know? So I almost like, I don't know if you guys talked about this on Off the Chain, so I apologize if it's redundant to you, but I mean, would you want to see them run it back for a third time?
Only out of morbid curiosity to see what weird thing happens this time. Because you had the nutshot finish, the weird distraction of the mouthpiece finish. I guess I'd want to see what happens next. But honestly, we're talking about Mitrione is 41, and what's his name is 39, 38, 39. I think, that Sergey Haranhanov is. With the few fights that are left to them, I would rather they go do something else. It's the same way I feel about the Mir versus Nelson rematch that Bellator also just announced. Mir and Nelson are both on the wrong side of 40 and have taken a lot of shots to the head. Yeah. Ideally, I don't want to retire any fighter because I'm not the one who has to feed their family. But I at least hope they're very careful with what they're doing with themselves. And having said that, if they're going to fight X number more times, why run back a boring fight? The first Mir Nelson fight was terrible. If you've got Mitrione and Haratonov and Mir and Nelson all milling around, mix it up. Do something different.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying, but these guys, they have to make that decision to hang it up. You know what I mean? It's not something that you can tell them and the not have some sort of pushback on. Especially when you look at these guys when they do retire, they usually, I guess around 40 when they retire, they're gonna be done. But if you look at guys like, when Chael finally retired, which it seems like for good, it was because he hit in his 40s. But Uriah Faber's already coming back because he, sometimes maybe these guys just need a break, So, but like the thing you said about, it's funny you mentioned Mir and Nelson, because when I put up the Bellator sent out the images and stuff to announce it, and I put it up on Twitter. That was the only one ever. No one cared about because I put them up together with the Saturday night with the Lehman McDonald, and nobody seemed to care about that. Everyone had a comment to make about Mir and Nelson, and I was just like, come on, man. That's how I felt bad for them, but I also I hear where they're coming from.
And that's the funny thing, because I criticize Bellator's approach all the time. All the time I'm like, why do they have to top their cards with matchups of like 40-something UFC retreads, especially heavyweights? Heavyweights do not age like wine. All the things that make a bad heavyweight fight get worse as you get older. They get slower. Yeah. Their cardio gets worse. But then at the same time, things like this will happen, and it kind of validates or justifies what Bellator is doing, because they put out a really intriguing fight between two of their best fighters, Lehman and McDonald, and it doesn't get as much interest as a rematch between two 40-something heavyweights.
Yeah, obviously they do it because they know these guys that are veterans and legends and stuff. Their name recognition is going to draw, and by drawing them, the fighters on the undercard hopefully get some exposure. But yeah, man, because when I look at their younger talent, I feel because everyone, as soon as people think about knocking Bellator, they want to knock them for, oh, okay, you're bringing all the old timers into fight, but no one, it looks like the outside of the hardcores, nobody really pays mind to like the young and up and coming guys that they have over there until they start getting beat up themselves, and then they become legends or what have you. But yeah, man, I don't know. I definitely think it'd be nice to see a younger guy getting featured. The only time they do it really, I think, is when if there's a veteran defending a title or something against somebody that's been putting people away, and but they also don't have a pay-per-view model too, so I don't know. It's weird. It's weird, but I feel like Bellator is more of like the hardcore fans promotion. If you're looking at the top promotions, I don't know. What do you think?
Well, they've got a mixture. I mean, they definitely have names and fighters on their card that are out there to intrigue hardcore fans. They do an outstanding job at grabbing high-level talents from component arts of mixed martial arts. Like, they'll grab the point karate star like Valerie Lareda, or they signed that whole clutch of all-American wrestlers back in 2014 or so, like, Pico and Fortune and Storley and all those cats that they signed, and have really brought them along in a very intelligent manner. Mm-hmm. They haven't fed any of them to the wolves. Like, a lot of people kind of laughed at the misfortune when Aaron Pico lost his first fight. But that wasn't on Bellator. They've matched him very sensibly.
Yeah.
And it's just turning out that Aaron Pico hasn't demonstrated a well-rounded skill set yet. He's a great boxer and he's a great wrestler. Like, he's got the bricks, but like the mortar in between the bricks hasn't shown up yet. So that, as a hardcore fan myself, that's what intrigues me. When they when they sign a Dylan Dennis. There are all the punchlines about Dylan Dennis write themselves. I've interviewed him for Sherdog.com. I've spoken to the guy, and it's very easy to laugh at his kind of department store brand Conor McGregor kind of shtick that he has going on. Yeah. But he is a legit grappler.
Yeah.
And I know that you are a guy who trains yourself.
Yeah.
One thing I said to Dennis when I interviewed him, and I wasn't trying to butter him up, I was just trying to kind of open an avenue of conversation, but I said that he was the grappler that I would show to an MMA fan who thinks grappling is boring. Because he's this super aggro guy that's bent on the finish, almost to the point that he doesn't do as well as he might in some competitions because the guy doesn't know how to score points. You know what I mean? All he knows how to do is try to finish you, and he actually liked that. But yeah, I mean, Bellator does a great job of grabbing, kind of stars from different arts and seeing if they can make them into great mixed martial artists. That is a great thing for me as a hardcore fan. But then the vehicle they use to get that in front of as many eyes as possible is for the ultra casual fans. Just throw in some name that they might recognize from 8 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I don't know, man. I mean, there's who knows what's in the future for them as far as like with the way the sport's being I mean, obviously now it's in the forefront. Everybody knows what MMA is, and it's on TV almost every day with ESPN having both the UFC and PFL there. But with the streaming stuff coming, who knows how much easier it's going to get for folks to just access more of the promotions like Bellator and CES and all these other ones that are out there. But talking about the sports growth, obviously a lot of people like to say with the sale of the UFC that Conor McGregor was responsible for it. Then we haven't, then he goes and does this high-profile boxing. We don't see him for a while, and now he did this interview last week with Helwani, and I just wanted to get your take on it because obviously there were so many. We got a lot of information out of it. I wrote an article at Sherdog based on the information as far as fighting goes and the sport itself. But then there was a lot of people that there's people that wrote blogs and reactions to how the interview was conducted. So just as someone in the space at your level, like yourself, what did you think of that? Like as far as I mean, the news, not only the news that came out of it as far as his potential return, but the way that it came about and how it was handled.
There's part of me that has a very cynical take on it, and then there's part of me that sees it as kind of sincere. Like the thing that made the biggest news out of it was him acting apologetic and contrite and talking about some of his public missteps, and saying that he has to take responsibility for them and kind of change the direction his life is going. Mm-hmm. That's what got the biggest headlines, but what the bulk of the interview was about was, talking about his past fights and then talking about his return and throwing out names of potential opponents. I do think he's sorry and does want to change, how things have been going for him. Mm-hmm. I mean, he is. At least I don't think he's a sociopath. He's definitely someone with poor impulse control. Who almost like John Jones gets in trouble when he is idle and doesn't have something going on to keep him focused on the next goal. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, he needs MMA as much as it needs him. Like, he clearly goes off the rails when he is not training for something. Yeah.
And that's, I mean, so that I don't leave you hanging like I was putting you out there to catch any heat. I mean, my take on it was, and I actually say this a lot to my training partners. I've said it on this podcast before. I think when you're as young as as far as when they've started making a lot of money in the sport, John Jones is another example. When you're as young as they are and you get a lot of money and you become a face in the space that they're in, I think something happens to them where they start to feel untouchable and like you said, impulse control and stuff like that. And I mean, I'm going to get a little personal here, but like as somebody myself, like I'm up there in age now, but when I was younger, when I was the age of Conor and John Jones, I had issues with my temper and stuff like that, and impulse control and things like that. And so in his apology, I mean, I thought it was sincere too. I actually believed he was sorry too, because I could tell just by the tone and the way he was saying it. It seemed familiar to me as somebody that had his own issues in the past with controlling anger and stuff like that. One of the things that one of the criticisms I had, because Helwani was like, he didn't really ask. He asked him what he's doing to fix it, but he never really he didn't get into any specifics. And I don't know if that was controlled by Conor's people or what, but usually when someone says ask you, okay, I'm going to do better, you want to know how, what are you doing? So in my case, when I was when I was 29, 30 years old, I knew I needed to get anger management, so I went and got it. But I didn't hear Conor McGregor say anything like that. You know what I mean? So I don't know if there's anything that you caught from that as far as like looking to how he's fixing himself, that left you wondering as far as how he's going to fix moving forward goes.
I didn't hear any specific plans out of him, and Helwani definitely did not hold his feet to the fire over it. You know, he let him kind of just pivot away from it. I mean, the thing I took away from it confirmed what seems to be the case over the last, now 2 years since he fought Floyd Mayweather, that he's not been active in any combat sport. He needs the sport as badly as it needs him. At the heart of it all, he is a dude who loves to fight. He loves martial arts. He loves the competition. He says all sorts of outrageous things before a fight, but after a fight, he's usually pretty level-headed. He loves fighting, and he is watching it pass him by. I mean, if you watch his patterns over the last year or two, anybody that wins a fight between 145 and 170, Conor's sending out the congratulatory tweet. It doesn't matter if it's Holloway, Iaquinta, Masvidal, whoever, just sending out a little congratulations just to kind of keep himself in the storyline, to keep himself relevant. I think Nate Diaz coming back so triumphantly the weekend before last killed McGregor. I think it completely killed him to see Diaz come back, look great. I mean, I did not pick Diaz to win that fight, and I was dead wrong. Diaz looked sensational, and he was his same old kind of hilarious self on the mic. His star has not diminished. If anything, it's gotten bigger since then. The crowd erupted for the guy. And I think McGregor watching that happen, and his own name not being in Diaz's mouth, makes him feel like it's passing him by and he's growing irrelevant. And I think, when all the money and the fame and the jet set lifestyle, is kind of getting stale for him because, he's a father, and I think he's terrified that the sport is passing him by. I think the timing of this, even more than the video coming out of him punching the dude in the bar, I think the return of Diaz and Masvidal just kind of matchmaking themselves in the cage afterwards probably sparked this as much as anything. Because Conor McGregor is perfectly at liberty to ignore public scandals. I mean, you remember the whole phone smashing thing that happened just a couple months ago, right? Yeah. He didn't say squat about it. Yeah. He said something about this because he needed a long-form interview with Helwani to get himself back into the sport, with the appropriate amount of publicity around it.
Yeah. No, I mean, you know what? Like you said, every time a high-profile fight happens, he does feel the need to comment on it. But as far as like going back to the thing with his impulse control too, I think if somebody has issues with reactions like him at the level that he competes at, because like for me, I've actually said to a lot of people that because like you said, I do train, but there's levels to everything. And even though I hold a black belt and all that stuff, I'm still a hobbyist compared to professional fighters. And so I'm a weekend warrior. But if I don't have those weekends that I put in my time, the 3 days a week that I do it, then I definitely have a little more trouble controlling myself. So someone like him that fights at a high level, professional level, if he doesn't have, he went from fighting 3 times a year to no times a year. So it's like, I'm pretty sure the things we've seen, the phone thing, the old man in the pub thing, has a lot to do with that. It's not justifying it, but I think, like you said, it's a combination of as far as the interview coming out, it's a combination of just not being out of the space, and the other thing was I wonder if, like, the thing with the phone, and who knows how this thing happened with. I know they said it's being investigated with the old man in the pub, but all these other issues, I wonder if it's starting to cost him that he needs to do something to make money. You know what I mean? Like outside of, I know he's not hurting that bad. He's got other things going on, but and I actually talked about this with my training partners too. I'm like, okay, I know he's got he's investing in a clothing line and the Proper 12 thing. So we see a lot of the Proper 12 stuff, but I don't see McGregor shirts hanging in any stores around here. So I mean, I just started seeing Proper 12 at the liquor store around the corner from me. So I don't know. I don't know how well that's paying off for him either. So maybe he's got to go back to the original well he found his fortune in and just start fighting again.
I completely agree with you. And if he comes back, the person he fights against may be the difference between it being a $10 and a $25 million payday for him. So,
yeah,
that's why he has particular names in his mouth.
Yeah, and the names they asked him about too, like he said he wanted to pay attention to what happens in Abu Dhabi. But like he holds a win over Poirier and he holds a win over Holloway. But we talk about this stuff after training with my training partners all the time, and I said to them, I was like, if he fights them again, I don't think he beats them again, because he kind of stayed. McGregor's style is kind of the same. Both Holloway and Poirier have evolved a lot as martial artists.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So like I don't think, he's not fighting the same cats. This isn't pre WME IMG UFC. You know what I mean? These guys are the top of the food chain now.
Oh, Poirier is an evolved version of himself. He's the same fighter, just better at everything. Holloway is a different fighter. Holloway was 20 when they fought. Like, that fight looks completely different. Maybe McGregor does beat him again if they fight again, but the fight doesn't look the same. Yeah.
Yeah, no. So, who knows if he's waiting on 242's outcome, and who knows if he's even got a dog in that fight, because ultimately they're going to, if he needs to fight and come back before the end of the year, it's the other thing I got out of that interview, he's going to have to take something that he wouldn't have normally taken 8 months ago or whatever, Well,
just the fact that he seemed to acquiesce to the idea that he might be the co-main instead of the main event in his comeback fight. Mm-hmm. That's something that he would not have accepted a year ago.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, no. So, it looks like we caught the same thing, but I guess, I know this weekend, I'm probably going to miss the UFC event this weekend. So I do have my picks for it, but I don't know how your picks have been doing, but on Sherdog, but I don't think I've saved myself from how good I used to be versus what's been happening. I think I did all right this last weekend, though. I don't know about you. How'd you do?
I did not. Well, we were whittled down to only 4 picks.
Yeah.
By the end of it, just because the what do you call it fight was changed so late. The Minikov fight was changed so late that we didn't have time to get picks again from all 21 people worldwide. So we ended up with a 4-fight card. I went 2 for 4, which made me the worst person on the entire Sherdog team. Everyone else got at least 3 right.
Yeah, I think I got 3 right. I was looking at it yesterday. It's been a crazy weekend for me though. So, all right, man. That's pretty much it. I just wanted to catch up with you and have you come on and fill in. You had offered when we did Off the Chains. Is that every Monday you guys record and it comes out on Wednesdays, right?
No, it comes out on Tuesday. It premieres Tuesday afternoon. Just enough time to kind of do the little edits that the video needs. The longer it sits, the more the stories stale or even change, just because things move so fast in this sport. But no, it's been a pleasure talking to you. I do it anytime. Definitely a lot of fun to kind of weigh in on these things that are still fresh from the weekend.
Yeah, definitely, man. I appreciate it. And if you got anything you want to plug outside of the Sherdog.com and your Twitter handle and stuff, but by all means, go ahead.
Oh, well, my Twitter handle is @BenjaminDuffy. I'm the only one. And you can find me on Sherdog.com. There's a little drop-down menu on your features, and if you click that, I'm in that menu, and you can just click on that and go to all my stuff. But I publish something or other on the site most weeks, and I'm behind a lot of the pieces that you see.
Cool. And as always, folks that are listening can follow the podcast at Combat Hour on Twitter, and me on Twitter at Carbazel. And that's pretty much it for this week. I'm going to add the audio from, just because I had you on, I'm going to add the audio from my Tywan Claxton interview that I did for Sherdog on the end of this podcast for the Bellator in San Jose. because Matt is actually going to that event. He usually goes to the West Coast though for the podcast a lot on his own. So I'm gonna do that. But Sherdog themed podcast episode this week. So thanks again, Ben Duffy, for filling in for Matt.
Thanks for having me, Ed.
Cool.